Millionaire enters a contract marriage to save his family's fortune, but finds his one true love. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories every week. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain over New York City fell hard that evening, streaking across the glass walls of Coal Industries' penthouse office. Inside, the light was dim, the air cold and still, the kind of silence that only money and exhaustion could buy. Ethan Cole stood by the window, his reflection a faint outline against the skyline he owned, but never enjoyed. His jaw was tight, his hands buried in his pockets. On the massive desk behind him sat a single folder sealed in black leather. Across the room, Claire Bennett hesitated at the door, clutching her worn purse close. She had been his assistant for almost a year, long enough to know he never called anyone to his office after midnight. Her father was waiting for her at the hospital across town, and the last subway left in 40 minutes. Still, when Ethan Cole said, "Come, you came." "Mr. Cole?" she asked softly. "You wanted to see me?" He turned, slow, deliberate, his eyes unreadable. "Sit down, Claire." Tree. Her stomach twisted. The last time he used that tone, half the department lost their jobs. She sat, trying to hide the tremor in her hands. Ethan reached for the folder and pushed it across the desk. "I need you to sign this," he said. She frowned. "Is this about work?" "In a way," he replied, "but not the kind you think." Claire opened the folder. Inside was a legal contract, printed in perfect black type, her name written neatly at the top. Her eyes scanned the first line, then froze. Marriage agreement. Her pulse skipped. She looked up sharply. This is a joke, right?" Ethan's expression did not move. "No, it is an offer. You are asking me to marry you?" "I am asking you to enter a contract that will last 6 months," he said, his voice steady, businesslike. "In return, I will cover all of your father's medical expenses and ensure you have financial stability for the rest of your life." The fluorescent light flickered once. Claire could hear the rain beating harder against the glass, like a warning. "Why me?" she whispered. Ethan exhaled slowly, looking down at the gold watch on his wrist. "Because I trust you, and because my father's will gives me 30 days to be married, or my uncle takes control of everything I have built." She leaned back, disbelief mixing with pity. "So, this is about money." "It is about control," he said. "It is about keeping my company alive." Claire shook her head, still dazed. "You could ask anyone. You could hire an actress, a model." "I do not want an actress," he interrupted. "I want someone who understands what it means to keep a promise." The room fell silent again. She stared at him, at the man whose world seemed to orbit power and precision, now asking for something that sounded dangerously close to desperation. Her father's hospital bills flashed in her mind, the unpaid rent, the eviction notice taped to her door. Her voice trembled. "You do not love me." "May?" Ethan's gaze softened for the first time. "Love is not part of this deal. Safety is. For both of us." A single clap of thunder rolled over the city. Claire's fingers hovered above the contract. Her reflection looked back at her from the polished glass of the desk, tired, small, scared. And yet, beneath the fear, there was something else, resolve. "If I sign," she said quietly, "what happens next?" Ethan reached into the drawer, pulled out a silver pen, and placed it in front of her. "Then we stop pretending," he said. "At least about the kind of people we really are." The rain outside softened, but the tension inside the room thickened. Claire took the pen. Somewhere in the distance, a clock ticked past midnight, marking the start of a marriage born not from love, but from necessity. The next morning, the world looked different to Claire Bennett. The rain had stopped, but the air outside Ethan Cole's office still felt heavy, as if the storm had only moved indoors. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the silver pen gliding across the page, her own signature blooming like a confession at the bottom of that contract. By the time she reached her small apartment in Queens, the sun was already high. Her phone buzzed non-stop with missed calls from the hospital billing department. She ignored them, opened her refrigerator, and found nothing inside but a carton of milk and an apple. Her father's framed photo sat on the counter, his smile reminding her of promises she could no longer afford to keep. Later that day, a black sedan pulled up in front of her building. The driver, wearing a dark suit, stepped out and handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a short note in Ethan's handwriting. "Be ready by 7. Formal attire. A car will pick you up." No explanation, no signature, just an order, written with precision. At 7 sharp, the car stopped at her door again. Claire stood in a navy dress that did not belong to her, one she had rented years ago for a friend's wedding. The driver opened the door silently, and they rode through the city in silence. When they stopped, she looked out and saw the gleaming marble columns of the downtown courthouse. Her pulse quickened. She had expected a meeting, maybe an introduction, but not this. Ethan was already there, standing on the courthouse steps in a dark gray suit, every inch of him controlled and immaculate. He nodded once. Inside, everything moved fast. The officiant read the vows like they were lines in a business contract. Ethan's lawyer witnessed. The notary signed. And then it was done. "You may now exchange rings," the officiant said gently. Ethan slipped a simple band onto her finger. Cool metal, light as air. For a second, their eyes met. His were calm, too calm, as if he had practiced detachment his whole life. "Congratulations," the officiant said. "You are now husband and wife." Why? Those words felt unreal, like dialogue from a film she was not meant to star in. Claire's breath caught. The pen, the paper, the vows, it all blurred together in a haze of disbelief. When they stepped outside, a light drizzle began again, thin and silver against the city lights. A car waited for them at the curb. Claire followed Ethan in silence, still trying to understand what she had done. As the vehicle moved through the quiet streets, she dared to ask, "What happens now?" Ethan turned his head toward the window, his reflection sharp against the glass. "Now," he said, "we begin the act." "The act?" she echoed. "Our marriage has to appear real," he replied. "Starting tonight, you will move into my residence. There will be staff, events, and people watching. You will be Mrs. Cole in every way that matters publicly. But behind closed doors, you will have your space. You will have freedom." Claire's hands twisted in her lap. "And after 6 months?" He looked at her then, the faintest shadow of emotion crossing his face. "After 6 months, you will be free. You will have your father's care fully paid for. You will never have to worry again." The car slowed as they turned through iron gates leading to a sprawling estate on the Hudson River. The house loomed ahead, stone walls, glass balconies, and light spilling from 100 windows. It looked less like a home and more like a museum of solitude. When the car stopped, a butler opened the door. Ethan stepped out first, then offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. His palm was warm, steady. Inside, everything gleamed. The chandelier above her head scattered 1,000 shards of gold light. Staff moved silently through the hallways, their expressions polite but curious. Ethan's voice cut through the stillness. "This will be your room," he said, leading her down a long corridor. The door opened to reveal a suite larger than her entire apartment. A view of the river shimmered through the glass. "Dinner is at 7, he added. "Formal. The housekeeper will help you settle in." And just like that, he was gone. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, the ring still cool against her skin. Outside, the river glowed under the fading sky. Somewhere deep in the mansion, she could hear the faint echo of a clock striking the hour, marking the start of 6 months that could change her life forever. Dinner that evening was quieter than Claire had imagined. The long oak table could have seated 20, but only 2 places were set, one at each end. The silverware gleamed under the chandelier, untouched. The housekeeper moved like a shadow, serving dishes Claire could barely name. Roasted salmon, truffle risotto, wine older than she was. It felt more like a performance than a meal. Ethan sat across the distance, dressed in another suit, his expression perfectly calm. "I trust the staff has helped you settle in," he said. Claire nodded politely. "Yes, everything is beautiful." He gave a faint smile. "Beauty tends to lose its meaning when you live surrounded by it." The silence returned, thick and formal. Claire's appetite vanished. She watched him cut his food with surgical precision, the faint clink of his fork echoing down the long table. Trying to fill the emptiness, she asked, "Do you always eat alone?" "Most nights," he replied. Company tends to complicate things. Her chest tightened at the loneliness in his voice. Then I suppose tonight is complicated. That earned a small laugh, the first she had heard from him. Perhaps. Trade? After dinner, Ethan led her to his study, a room lined with dark shelves and soft yellow light. On the desk sat a new document, another contract. I thought we already signed one, she said cautiously. This one defines the rules of our arrangement, he answered. 3 main points: no interference in personal affairs, attendance at all public events, and absolute confidentiality. Claire crossed her arms. And if I break a rule? He met her eyes. Then the contract is void. And so is the protection I promised. She stared at the paper. You really are a businessman, even in marriage. He shrugged slightly. It is the only way I know how to keep things from falling apart. Claire signed again, her signature smooth this time, almost practiced. He took the paper, folded it carefully, and locked it away. When she turned to leave, he spoke quietly. You will meet my Uncle Victor tomorrow. He will test you. Say little, listen more. He thrives on weakness. 1. Sounds delightful, she muttered under her breath. Ethan almost smiled. He will not like you. I will survive, she said, lifting her chin. As she walked back to her suite, the hallways felt colder. Every step echoed in the marble corridor. She paused outside her door, fingers grazing the ring on her hand. It looked strange there, so new and so heavy with meaning she did not understand. Inside her room, she noticed a small box on the vanity. A gift wrapped in silver paper. A note lay on top. For tomorrow. Inside was a simple diamond necklace. Elegant, but understated. Claire whispered to herself. He thinks of everything. That night, she stood by the window, watching the reflection of the city lights shimmer across the river. Somewhere in this house, her new husband was probably doing the same, calculating, planning, pretending. She wondered if he ever felt what she did now, the unease of living inside a life that was not quite hers. The clock struck 11. The house fell silent. And as she lay in the enormous bed, the contract tucked away in a locked drawer down the hall, Claire realized she was no longer just an assistant or a caretaker's daughter. She was Mrs. Cole, by law and by signature, bound to a man who treated love as a transaction. But something told her that not even Ethan Cole could keep emotions from breaching a contract forever. The next morning began with a rush of preparation. Claire woke to find the house alive with movement stylists, assistants, and wardrobe specialists, filling the hallway like a small army. The air smelled faintly of perfume and pressed linen. A woman named Lillian, the chief stylist, handed her a cup of coffee and said briskly, Mr. Cole wants you ready for a business gala tonight. We have 6 hours to turn you into someone the press will adore. Claire blinked, half awake. The press? Lillian smiled professionally. Of course, you are Mrs. Cole now. Appearances matter. In the mirror, Claire barely recognized herself as they worked. Her hair was curled into smooth waves. Her makeup soft but flawless. Her posture corrected with every pin of the dress. The gown shimmered like liquid silver, cut perfectly to fit her frame. By evening, the car glided through the city toward the grand ballroom of the Langford Hotel. Reporters already lined the red carpet, flashes cutting through the winter night. Ethan stepped out first, immaculate in his tailored black suit. When he offered his hand, Claire hesitated for only a moment before placing hers in his. The cameras exploded in light. Mr. Cole, is this your new bride? Someone shouted. Ethan's arm wrapped around her waist, his tone smooth and firm. Yes, my wife, Claire. The word wife sounded strange to her ears, heavier than the diamond necklace at her throat. She smiled for the cameras, pretending not to notice her heartbeat echoing in her chest. Inside the ballroom, gold chandeliers glowed above polished marble floors. Waiters carried champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres, while the city's elite exchanged rehearsed laughter. Claire felt the eyes of 100 strangers measuring her every move. Relax, Ethan murmured beside her. You are doing fine. She forced a breath, whispering back. Easy for you to say. You were born in this world. Well, he glanced at her then, his expression unreadable. No one is born ready for it. Minutes turned to hours as introductions and polite small talk blurred together. When Claire excused herself to the balcony for air, She found herself looking down at the glittering skyline. The city stretched endlessly, both beautiful and indifferent. Behind her, a familiar voice spoke. "So you are the new Mrs. Cole." She turned. A tall man in his 50s stood in the doorway, his smile sharp. His eyes mirrored Ethan's, but colder. "Uncle Victor," Claire said, recalling Ethan's warning. He studied her for a long moment. "You are prettier than I expected. And quieter, too. That may save you." "I am not here to impress anyone," she replied evenly. Victor chuckled. "Good, because you will not." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I know why you are here. When the 6 months end, you will be gone. And Ethan will still be alone. He always is." "Hi?" Before she could answer, Ethan appeared, his tone cool but edged. "Victor, I did not invite you to interrogate my wife." Victor smirked. "Then maybe you should have chosen a wife who needs less defending." The tension between them was palpable. Claire placed a steady hand on Ethan's arm. "It is fine," she said quietly. "He is not worth it." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded and turned back toward the ballroom. Claire followed, heart pounding, aware that every whisper now carried their names. As the night ended, she noticed something change in Ethan's expression just for a moment. The cold businessman disappeared, replaced by a man who looked almost proud. In the car ride home, the city lights flickered across his face. Neither of them spoke for several minutes until Ethan finally said, "You handled him well." Claire looked out the window and smiled faintly. "I've been handling difficult men my whole life." He glanced her way, a hint of warmth in his eyes. "Then, maybe you are the perfect partner after all." She did not answer, but for the first time since signing that contract, she felt the faintest spark of something that was not duty, something dangerously close to connection. The following week passed in a blur of public appearances, photo shoots, and endless charity luncheons. Every day came with a new dress, a new set of instructions, and another reminder from Ethan's assistant. "Remember, Mrs. Cole, you are the image of stability." Claire learned how to walk through a crowd without flinching when cameras flashed. She learned to smile just enough to look approachable, but not naive. And slowly, the whispers around her began to change. People who had once doubted her started calling her elegant, graceful. The woman who softened Ethan Cole. Venzatine. But not everyone believed the fade. At a corporate gala for Cole Industries, the atmosphere was crisp with ambition. The ballroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers as investors and board members toasted to another year of profit. Claire stood beside Ethan, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She had grown used to playing her part, but tonight felt different. Too many eyes, too many smiles that did not reach the heart. Halfway through the evening, a reporter approached one of those who lived for scandal. "Mrs. Cole," he said smoothly, his voice carrying through the crowd. "Rumor has it your marriage was arranged. Care to comment?" The room stilled. Cameras shifted toward them. Claire felt her throat tighten, but she kept her posture steady. She could feel Ethan's gaze on her, silent but warning. She smiled politely. "Arranged? That is an interesting word. My husband and I have an understanding. We believe in partnership, in purpose." The reporter smirked. "So it is a contract, then?" Claire's heart pounded, but she did not look away. "Every marriage is a contract of some kind," she said calmly. "Ours simply started with honesty." The crowd murmured. Some laughed softly. And then, to her surprise, a few people clapped. Ethan's expression did not change, but his eyes, usually so cold, softened with something like admiration. He took her hand and squeezed it once, the gesture subtle but unmistakable. As the night continued, Ethan introduced her to partners and executives. To her own astonishment, she found herself speaking confidently about company initiatives, about new charity programs, even about ideas she had mentioned casually at breakfast. Ethan listened. He actually listened. When the event ended, they walked through the quiet hallway leading to the car. Claire let out a long breath. "Was that good enough for your board?" she asked with a small smile. Ethan looked at her. "It was better than I expected. You made them believe." She raised an eyebrow. "Believe what?" "That we are exactly what we look like," he said softly. "A team." For a brief moment, neither spoke. The distance between them felt smaller than it had ever been. The driver opened the car door. Claire stepped in first, the hem of her gown brushing the pavement. Ethan followed, sitting beside her instead of across. As the car began to move, The city lights flickered over their faces, fading and returning like shifting stars. "You did not answer the reporter's question," he said finally. "You could have denied everything." Claire looked out the window, her voice quiet. "I did not need to deny it. Sometimes the truth is not about facts, it is about what we choose to protect." Ethan studied her for a long moment. "You are a mystery, Mrs. Cole." "Martal." She turned to him, meeting his eyes. "No, Mr. Cole, you just never bothered to look closely." The silence that followed was heavy but not cold. Somewhere between the act and the truth, something had changed. The performance no longer felt like pretending, and neither of them was ready to admit why. That night, long after the gala ended, Claire stood on the balcony outside her bedroom. The river below shimmered with the reflection of city lights, the soft hum of traffic floating through the cold air. The gown she wore earlier was draped across a chair, her hair unpinned, falling in loose waves. She was still replaying Ethan's words in her mind, a team. It should have meant nothing. It meant too much. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she said quietly. Ethan stepped inside. No tie, sleeves rolled up, looking more like a man than a headline. "You left your purse downstairs," he said, placing it on the dresser. But he did not leave. "Thank you," she replied. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the ticking of the clock. He glanced around the room, then toward the open balcony. "You should close the doors. It is freezing out there." "I like the cold," she said softly. "It reminds me I am still alive." Ethan hesitated before walking closer. "Tonight went well. You handled yourself better than I could have hoped." "All do. Better than you?" she teased lightly. "Possibly," he said with a faint smile. "You have a way of disarming people without them realizing it." Claire looked down at her hands. "Maybe that is why I am good at pretending." Ethan studied her face. "You think that is all we are doing? Pretending?" Her voice wavered. "That was the deal, was it not?" He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking. "Maybe it was. But somewhere along the way, I stopped knowing where the act ends and the truth begins." The words hung in the air like fragile glass. Claire felt her pulse quicken. She wanted to look away, but his eyes held her still. "You do not have to say anything," he said quietly. "I just needed you to know." She swallowed hard. "Why me, Ethan? You could have chosen anyone, someone who fits better in your world." He shook his head slowly. "Because you never wanted anything from me. Not money, not power, just honesty. And that is the one thing no one ever asked for." The wind swept through the balcony, lifting the curtains around them. Claire's eyes softened. "You think honesty is enough?" "It is a start," he said. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Then she stepped back, needing space. "This is not part of the contract." "I know," he replied. "That is what scares me." Ethan turned toward the door, pausing before leaving. "Good night, Claire." "You crest." When he was gone, she exhaled shakily, her hands pressed to her heart. Everything inside her felt tangled gratitude, fear, something dangerously close to love. The next morning, she found a note on the breakfast table, written in his familiar handwriting. "Meeting in the city. Back by evening. Dinner at 8? It was the first time he had ever written a question mark to her. All day, she caught herself smiling without reason. Even the staff noticed. But as the sun dipped behind the skyline, that warmth began to fade. She received a call from the hospital. Her father's condition had worsened. By the time Ethan returned, Claire sat in the study, her eyes red but her voice steady. "I need to fly to Boston tomorrow," she said. "He does not have much time." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I will make the arrangements." And for the first time since their deal began, he crossed the room and held her. No pretense, no act. Just two people standing in a house too big for their own hearts, realizing that what had started as a contract was beginning to feel like something real. Claire left for Boston at dawn, the sky still gray, the air sharp with winter wind. Ethan had arranged everything, the car, the flight, even a private nurse to help at the hospital. Her father's condition was fragile, but he opened his eyes long enough to see her. She held his hand and whispered stories from childhood until his breathing softened into sleep. 2 days later, he was gone. The funeral was small and quiet. No reporters, no headlines. Only the faint sound of church bells and the scent of white lilies. Ethan stood beside her through it all, saying little, simply being there. When she leaned against him, he let her. No words could have done more. When they returned to New York, something between them had shifted. The walls of formality seemed thinner now. For a few days, there was peace. Claire spent her mornings walking along the river, her evenings reading by the fireplace. Ethan would join her sometimes, both of them content to share the silence. Then, one Friday morning, the storm broke. It started with a phone call from the office. Ethan's expression hardened as he listened. When he hung up, he said only 2 words. "It leaked." Claire frowned. "What leaked?" "The contract," he said quietly. "Someone sent it to the press." Within hours, the news spread across every major outlet. Headlines screamed, "Fake marriage scandal. Ethan Cole's secret deal exposed." Photos of their wedding appeared online, alongside the very document she had signed. Every detail, every clause was now public. By afternoon, reporters surrounded the gates of the Cole estate. Camera flashes pierced the windows. Claire's phone filled with messages from strangers calling her a gold digger, a liar, a fraud. She turned to Ethan, her voice shaking. "You said this would stay between us." "I did not do this," he said firmly. "Someone inside the company did. I will find out who." "But the damage is already done," she whispered. "They think I married you for money." Ethan stepped forward. "Claire, listen to me." "No," she interrupted, tears burning in her eyes. "You can stand there and call it business, but it was my life. You promised to protect me." He hesitated, jaw tight. "I am trying to protect the company right now. I just need time to." "Time?" she said bitterly. "You have all the time in the world, Ethan. I do not." She tore the ring from her finger and set it on the table. "I cannot do this anymore." Before he could stop her, she walked past him, past the guards, and into the storm of flashing cameras. Her image, drenched, furious, heartbroken, hit the news within minutes. Inside the mansion, Ethan watched the screen as her car disappeared down the drive. For the first time in years, the man who built an empire out of control and precision felt completely powerless, and the silence that followed was louder than any scandal he had ever faced. 3 days after the story broke, Ethan Cole's world looked nothing like it once had. Reporters camped outside his office building. Shareholders demanded explanations. The board was preparing an emergency vote to remove him as CEO. Every headline repeated the same accusation: fraud, deception, betrayal. But the only thing he could think about was Claire. Her number was disconnected. Her apartment in Queens was empty. She had vanished from the city as completely as if she had never been there. That morning, Ethan sat alone in his office, the same one where he had first pushed that leather folder across the desk. The rain outside sounded exactly the same as it had that night. He opened the drawer and found her silver pen, the one she had used to sign their contract. It was broken in half. He stared at it for a long time, then closed his hand around it. "I did this," he whispered. That afternoon, the shareholders' meeting began. The room was packed. Executives, investors, reporters, cameras. His uncle Victor sat near the front, smug and waiting. Ethan took the microphone, the same one Claire had used at the gala when she faced the press without fear. He cleared his throat. "You all read the stories. Yes, the marriage began as a contract. Yes, I signed it. And yes, I was the one who proposed it." Murmurs spread through the crowd. He continued, voice firm. "But what you do not know is that somewhere between legal terms and real life, that woman became more honest, more loyal, and more human than anyone in this room." Victor stood, his voice cutting across the hall. "Are you admitting to defrauding this company?" Ethan shook his head. "No. I am admitting that I built this company on the wrong idea of love, conditional, transactional, controllable. Claire taught me that the only contract worth signing is the one written with truth." He reached into his pocket and placed his resignation letter on the podium. "I am stepping down as CEO effective immediately." Gasps filled the room. "And before you assume guilt, let me be clear. This is not an apology to the board. It is a promise to the woman I wronged." He held up another document. "From this day, 30% of my shares will fund a new foundation called the Claire Funda Program, supporting women facing financial crisis, just like she once did. That is the legacy I choose." The flashes went off again, blinding but meaningless. Ethan walked out of the building without another word, leaving the chaos behind. Outside, the rain hit his face, cold and heavy, but it felt clean. That night, he sat alone on the balcony of the empty mansion, staring at the ring she had left behind. He placed it beside the broken pen and whispered, "No more contracts, Claire. Just love." Somewhere out there, he hoped she was listening. 1 month later, the city was warmer, softer somehow, as if winter had finally loosened its grip. Ethan Cole had disappeared from the news cycle. New scandals had replaced his, new names filled the headlines. But for once, he did not care. He had sold his penthouse, moved out of the mansion, and donated the first check to the Claire Fund. His life was quieter now. No boardrooms, no reporters, no contracts. That morning, he drove north to a small town along the Hudson River. A friend from the foundation had told him about a community art program for underprivileged families, one funded by the first grant from the Claire Fund. He had not planned to go, but something inside him needed to see it for himself. The building was simple brick walls, painted windows, the faint smell of coffee drifting from inside. Children's drawings lined the walls, full of color and light. And there, at the front of the room, standing by a table of paintbrushes, was Claire. For a moment, Ethan could not breathe. She looked different, calmer, brighter, free. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a smudge of paint on her wrist. She turned when she heard the door, and for a second, her eyes widened. "Ethan," she said softly. He managed a smile. "I heard you built something good here." She nodded. "It is not just me. The fund helped. It saved this place." He took a slow step closer. "No, Claire. You saved it. I just followed your example." For a moment, they stood there, surrounded by the sound of children laughing in another room. It felt nothing like the mansion, nothing like the world they had built from signatures and lies. It felt real. Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out a small weathered box. Inside was the same wedding ring she had once left behind, now polished and gleaming. He placed it gently on the table between them. "I kept it," he said quietly. Not as proof of a mistake, but as a reminder of where everything started. Claire looked at the ring, then at him. "And where does it end, Ethan?" He shook his head. "It does not. Not if you are willing to start over with no contracts, no conditions. Just love." Once, for a long time, she said nothing. Then she smiled the same small, unguarded smile that had once disarmed him at a gala months ago. "I kept something too," she whispered, pulling from her pocket a folded page from their original contract. She placed it beside the ring. "I was going to throw it away, but I realized it reminded me that even the wrong beginnings can lead to the right ending." Ethan reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined, warm and steady. Outside, sunlight spilled through the windows, washing the room in gold. And as they stood there, surrounded by paint and laughter and second chances, the world felt new again, proof that love, once real, never needed a contract to last.